Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
As parents, we've got this wonderful hindsight of experience that tells us this road could, not will, but this road could be dangerous.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
G'day, this is Dr. Justin Coulson, the author of a bunch of books about making families happy. Here with Kylie, my wife, mum to our 6 daughters, and the expert in making families happy.
Is that right?
Do you like that?
You're so funny.
And we have got a doozy of a question today. Every Tuesday we take listener questions. Email us podcasts@happyfamilies.com.au. I'm surprised that we haven't been getting more lockdown questions, because with half the country in lockdown again, or thereabouts, New South Wales, obviously the whole state. We've got Victoria not looking good, and I'm expecting that lockdown questions are coming, but we don't have any at the moment. So this one from somebody who we're going to keep anonymous. She was okay with us using her name, but I think given the nature of the question, we should keep it anonymous. This is a real tricky one. And before we read the question, we need to acknowledge we have had direct experience with this, and it's heartbreaking and challenging. And I think it's possibly, Kylie, one of the most difficult experiences that we've ever had in our entire life.
This really, really stretched us as individuals, as a couple, and as parents.
And as a family. I mean, the repercussions continue in our home. Fortunately, we've managed to learn a lot through it and learned to love through it. But it's tough for any parent to go through. So why don't you read the question, Kylie, and then we'll talk about what some solutions may be to help families who are going through this particular challenge.
She said, how do I respect and accept my 18-year-old for who she wants to be while she is growing and experimenting, whilst it differs to the values and the morals that we have in our home? My eldest feels upset that we are not respecting her choices, but we are just trying to allow the other 2 children, especially the 3-year-old, to grow up in an age-appropriate manner without the influences that we don't agree with.
Yeah, what a tough one. So having been profoundly affected by this ourselves, we've got some runs on the board, and we've got a bit of science supporting the things that we think we can share to help this challenged parent. And this is kind of the thing, right? As parents, our job is to make ourselves redundant. But at the same time, we try so hard to transmit our values because we want our children to make safe, healthy, wise decisions. And it just so happens that the morality, the values that we choose to live our lives by, we tend to think are good ones, right? I mean, we like the way we live. And this is the same in every single family. When we see a child making decisions that are not consistent with our values, it's confronting, it's provoking, and sometimes it's stressful and frustrating.
Well, I think for the most part, as we watch our children start to make decisions, there's so many fears around the choices that they're making because they don't have the maturity, they don't have the experience to know where this road will lead them. And as parents, we've got this wonderful hindsight of experience that tells us this road could, not will, but this road could be dangerous, or this road could lead to heartbreak, or this road could lead to any number of things.
So the conversation that I always have with our kids is, you know what, life is so exciting for you right now. You've climbed 18 rungs up the ladder of life and the view is incredible. You can see more than you've ever been able to see before. The vistas are stunning and you just want to go and explore that world. Hey, guess what, kiddo? Your dad or your mum, we've climbed 40-something or 50-something rungs on that ladder of life. And while we can't see the detail, we're a long way from the ground now. We can see around corners. We can see through the shadows. We can see past the trees and the forests. We know what's coming and we want to keep you safe. But they're kind of like, no. You're too far away now. You're so far up there. You can't see what's on the ground.
Well, and you've forgotten.
You've forgotten
what it's like to be me.
Yeah, you need the binoculars and nobody passed them to you up that high. You just can't see what's going on. So it's a really tough thing. And I reckon the first thing to highlight, I've spoken to so many parents who have been through this, is there is a legitimate grieving process that we go through as parents when our children get to that age where they are absolutely unequivocally saying, it's my life. I'm going to do it my way. And when it's not consistent with what you hoped it would be, you grieve. As a parent, you have to say goodbye to the hopes and dreams. And I know a lot of people are going to be listening to this and going, oh, but we're so enlightened and you should just be letting your children live their life and it is their life and that's a parent's job is to let go. But after investing for 18 years, particularly when there are some values that you might hold particularly dear, particularly close, to see children turn around and drop them and maybe even be aggressive about them, or just to flaunt an alternative lifestyle in your face that you never saw coming, the only word that I can use is grief.
And I think for most parents, again, when you find yourself in this situation, often, not all the time, but often, it feels like you've been blindsided.
Yeah.
Because most kids, unless they're being particularly rebellious in the lead up, will kind of stay their ground long enough to reach adulthood before they open up the floodgates and kind of find their voice, so to speak, and being able to share the things that they want to do. And they get to that point and they just want to be who they want to be. And they don't want any influence from you. They don't want you to have a say, and they can't understand why you're not happy.
So it's really interesting because I know plenty of parents whose kids grow up and they just continue the same sort of way of life that their parents had. And that might be that they join dad down at the pub, or it might mean that they stay active in the same faith, or they join at the local Nippers surf club and continue to volunteer. A lot of kids will just sort of go the same path. But there are some times that there are values that we hold dear and the kids are just like, no, not going to do it. Not going there. And I think that's kind of where this is coming from. So that's the first thing that I wanted to highlight. Second thing that I wanted to highlight, I don't think that we need to be too concerned about what the younger siblings are going to see in their older siblings' decisions. I know, so I'm the oldest of 6 kids. You're the oldest of 3. And when I look at our 2 families, each child has grown up and made completely their own decisions. And you would imagine, looking at the way those lives have gone, that those decisions have been made pretty well independently of what the other siblings have done. Like, and I look at even our own kids now as they grow, they don't actually seem to be, I mean, I'm not going to say there's zero influence, but the level of influence of the older siblings doesn't strike me as being particularly strong. And I don't know of any research that shows that siblings are really going to be that big of an influence on other siblings, especially older to younger.
I think the biggest impact that other siblings will have is when there is contention in the home.
Right.
Regardless of the choices that your child is making, if you are constantly in battle with one another, that tension, that conflict, that is going to have the biggest influence.
So after the break, we're going to talk about how to minimize the conflict and how to actually work through and explore, explain, empower kind of conversation with an 18-year-old who really does want to live their own life, particularly when it's not consistent with your values or the way that you want things to be done in your home.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Imagine a home where discipline got results without anyone having to feel bad or in trouble. The Do's and Don'ts of Discipline is a webinar to help parents set limits with love, compassion, and humanity. Find it now at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And today we are talking about a really tricky issue. Your 18-year-old decides that they want to go their own way.
It's my life. Let me live it the way I want. But by the way, I'm going to do it under your roof. And that's the challenge, isn't it, right? I often think to myself, if the child would just move out and live their own life somewhere else so that you've got that distance, it's much easier. I mean, there's still going to be grief. There's still going to be sadness. There's still going to be concern, fear, worry, all that sort of stuff. But when your child is not near you, you can kind of deal with it a little bit better. But when they're doing it under your roof, it's like, oh, gosh, this is really tough. So this is what I reckon is going to be helpful. And Kylie, you've been there with me. We've worked through it, and who knows, we'll probably get to work through it again with some of our other kids because that's the nature of raising children. The first thing to remember is that force creates resistance. So we've got to get connection right. We've got to stop fighting with the kids, which is kind of impossible because they're having this in-your-face values challenge on a day-to-day basis. But it doesn't work. Force creates resistance. What force actually looks like to a child is rejection. If you're trying to force me to do it your way, what you're doing is you're saying that you're rejecting me as a person.
I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. You don't accept me. You said it so beautifully. The idea that we want to minimize the extent to which there is contention in our home, that is the central thing. And that all comes down to how much we are correcting and directing versus how much we're connecting. And the reality is when you've got an 18-year-old who's saying, leave me alone, it's my life, you can't make me, there's going to be a lot more correction and direction than there is connection. It's that whole force creates resistance. So here's what I would be saying. Firstly, and you want to say this really gently, now that you're 18, I've satisfied my obligations to you as a parent. You're an adult now. That means that while I will always be here to support you and I absolutely love you, I no longer have an obligation to tell you how to live your life or what to do. And I'm going to be sad about that and I'm going to grieve because I'm always going to want the best for you or what I believe is the best. But right now, what I believe is the best, you disagree with me on. So I have to let go of that. Number two, because you're now an adult, we don't have a financial responsibility for you anymore. You actually are the person who's responsible for you. Now, if you've never had this conversation before, you might want to give them, so we're going to give you a 3-month grace period. We're going to continue to support you for the next 3 months. But at that point, you've either got to be earning full-time or learning full-time and figuring out a way that you can live your life. Number three, if you wish to live your life in a manner that is not consistent with the values that we hold dear to us in this home and in this family, we accept that. We're sad about it, but it won't stop us loving you. And you will always be welcome here. However, we ask that if you're going to choose to act inconsistently with our values, that you do not do it under our roof, that you do not do it on our property, that you do not do it in view of mum, dad, the other siblings, whoever. And I don't think that that's an inappropriate thing to do.
I don't think that that's inappropriate either. I mean, if you are married to a mechanic, you wouldn't let him bring his car engine in and start pulling it apart on the carpet.
Yeah,
like we all have rules in our home, whether they're spoken or not. Hopefully you don't have to have that conversation with your mechanic husband. But the reality is you don't, that there are certain things that just are not appropriate in your home. Yeah.
Okay. So let's pick another easy one. Let's say you've always taught your kids not to smoke, and now you've got an 18-year-old who's decided to smoke. And I think it's completely reasonable for a parent to say, if that's what you choose to do, we're sad about it, we're disappointed, we don't think that it's healthy, we don't think it's safe, we don't think it's wise. But if you choose to do it, as much as it breaks our heart that you're choosing to do it because we've always raised you to be healthy and look after your body, your choice. But in our home, we don't smoke. We don't smoke in this house. We don't smoke in bedrooms. We don't smoke on the balcony. We don't smoke on our property.
We don't have other people show up and smoke in our house.
Right. And we would do the same thing. Like you and I, we have a no coarse language rule. And so we would expect that in our home, regardless of what goes on outside the home, that the kids respect that in our home. So that's kind of the conversation I'd be recommending with the 18-year-old. And then I'd be saying, so if you're not comfortable with that, over the next couple of months, we will support you as you do your very best to work out whose couch you're going to sleep on or where you're going to hang out or how you are going to move things forward from here, because we're not forcing you to live our life or our values, but we are going to ask that if you want to continue living here, you're financially providing for yourself because you're 18. You're earning or you're learning full time because we won't be able to support you ongoingly. It's not our job anymore. You're 18. And if you're going to stay here, we're going to ask that you are going to live consistently with those values.
The other day, we actually touched on those 3 psychological needs that each of our children need. And we talked about relatedness or connection.
Yep.
And how important that is to your relationship. We talked about competence, that our kids need to feel that they're capable of making decisions. And then we talked about autonomy. And the reality is we watch as our kids get older, their desire for autonomy gets stronger and stronger.
I think it's the central psychological need as they get older. I think it becomes the most important one in parenting.
And if we can, as they start working their way through those teenage years, if we can actually start to let go in small and simple steps, then letting go as an 18-year-old becomes a little bit easier. It's still hard. And I think that every parent goes through that grieving period, regardless of whether their children are making good decisions or difficult decisions, because it's hard. You've invested 18 years of your life to them and given them your whole heart through that process. And so I think that regardless of the choices they're making, it's hard. It becomes harder when you're having to let go of goals and dreams and thoughts of the future that you had for them.
We really hope that this is useful for those of you with big kids who are going through this kind of thing, or with little kids and you're really scared that you're going to go through this thing. The central thing, I reckon, it still comes down to connection. Nothing that you can do is going to be so big that I'll stop loving you. You will always, always be loved and you'll always be welcome. But just when you're here, keep to our values, please, because that's how we do it in our home. It's just respect. It's consideration. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media, and Craig Bruce is our executive producer. Tomorrow, for those of you who are raising teenagers who are getting ready for their big end-of-year exams, although everything's been thrown into chaos because of COVID-19 and lockdowns, we're still going to be talking with Katie Jones. Katie Jones is from Rock Solid Study, and she's going to tell us the 3 huge mistakes that students make in exams and assignments, and give us a whole lot of super practical tips and ways for kids to transform their grades. That's all happening tomorrow on the podcast. And on Thursday, we're looking at the doctor's desk, including a conversation about burnout in parents in 42 countries across the globe, plus a brand new spanking study that tells us exactly what's going on for our kids when we give them a whack. That's all coming up on the Happy Families podcast. I can't wait to share it with you. In the meantime, if you'd like more ongoing support for your family to make them happier, check out our Happy Families memberships. You can get all the info at happyfamilies.com.au.